Hello, welcome to the Bible Nation podcast. I'm Doug Levesque. With me today is Pastor Jason Georges of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Corunna, Michigan. We are at podcast number 12 of the 2024 season. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about Christian citizenship. In about 4 months, we will come upon another United States election. Did you know that? I think everybody knows that because that's all we've heard for the last 6 months already. And we've already got some weariness of election news. But I think it's a good time to talk about what Christians are supposed to do, what they're supposed to think, how they're supposed to act. We call that Christian citizenship. In the past, it was pretty much a staple that people learned in church, in school, in college. And today, there's really a dearth of instruction about how to be a Christian citizen. And so that's what we really want to do today. We'll be back in just a moment with In the News. What are we standing up for? The ability, the freedom to do what's right as God defines that right.
God's the ultimate author of liberty.
We don't want government to stand between us and our freedom to do what is right.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for the Bible Nation podcast. Today we're talking about Christian citizenship, and Bible Nation Society has just recently published this book called Christian Citizenship by Dr. Byron Fox and Dr. Phil Stringer. And these fellas were teaching at Dayspring Baptist Bible College in Illinois, and we transcribed their lessons, their lectures, and have got it in this print form for you, and this will be on the website soon. If you go to Bible Truth Music, Dr. Byron Fox, or Dr. Phil Stringer online, you should be able to find these as well. And it's going to be a good resource for you. I wouldn't necessarily call it a textbook, but it's an inspiring book that covers all the details. But now we're going to talk about In the News. We are just before the 4th of July week. Happy birthday, America. And but it's sad, the Trump Supreme Court did overturn Roe v. Wade. We were excited about that, surprised about that, and it went back to the states. Many states, 20-plus states, are holding the ground, right? No abortion states. Michigan was there. We were a no-abortion state, and we were thinking, hey, we've got this. But then because of the election and other issues, we lost that privilege and now are an abortion state. But we talked several episodes ago about the Idaho case going to the Supreme Court and about them taking the abortion issue to the emergency room. What about emergencies, health emergencies? And so that went to the Supreme Court, and they've had it for several months, and there's just been a leak. Really, it's not necessarily the formal decision, but there's been a leak on the decision, which I don't know who does that or why they would do that, but nevertheless, the Supreme Court apparently has ruled for emergency abortions in Idaho, meaning where Idaho is no abortion state, there's no abortion clinics and it's illegal, except if someone goes to a hospital in an emergency room and says, my stomach hurts, or I'm injured, or I have a bruise, or I can't go to the bathroom, or something like this, then they can go in there, declare it a health emergency for the person, and create an emergency abortion. And this puts us right back, really, to the arguments of Roe back in 1973. So this is a first big attempt to kind of undercut that Supreme Court decision. And I think it's meant, probably the reason it's leaked is because it's meant to be a big election issue that might go Biden's way. What do you think, Pastor?
Yeah, I'm looking at this article from the BBC.
Yeah.
It's always amazing, the British are interested in American politics.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing that really pops off the page about this is the leak. I mean, the Supreme Court's leak, which kind of smirks of putting their finger to the wind.
Yeah.
And to see how our people are going to respond and whatnot. Yeah. And that is totally contrary to the nature of what the Supreme Court's supposed to be.
Right.
It's supposed to operate in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be strictly on the intent and what the law says, and then they interpret it and with a historical context, right? Yeah. In other words, what was the original intent of why that law was written, or the Constitution, what it is. And so for them to now insert themselves in this socially charged debate, but now to be players in the almost like if you want to say it like in the social media conversation,
Right.
is not the role of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So first of all, that's a big concern to me as well. Yeah. And of course, obviously undermining, Idahoans. Is that what you call them there? Idahoans?
Idahos. Spuds.
Spuds.
I don't know.
If you're from all our listeners in Idaho, I apologize.
Yeah.
But, to undermine their will. Mm-hmm. And so the whole idea, we understood that when Roe v. Wade was upheld, but it was going to get bounced back to the states. Well, at least now every state, it put it back in a jurisdiction where the citizenry had a closer proximity to the issue.
Right.
In other words, we can,
right.
as
states' rights.
Yeah, as a Michigander, I have more opportunity to influence Michigan policy than I do federal policy.
Right.
And so, to undermine what they're trying to do there, obviously against their will on an agenda.
I think it's a Republican cop-out because Trump's like, yes, I'm proud to have picked the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade, but I'm not really for a national ban on abortion. I mean, that's doublespeak, and this is Republicans today, and so the Supreme Court, same way. Yes, we overturned Roe v. Wade on technical issues. We sent it back to the states, but now it's getting challenged by Idaho, and we're going to uphold abortion. You know what I'm saying? And so, what's not cut and dry about murdering a baby in the womb?
Right.
So there are the extenuating circumstance of either the mother or the baby are going to die. But usually the doctor doesn't know that. The doctors think they know that and want to play God, just like, science and COVID and everything else. But bottom line, there should be a 98% rule and then a 2% emergency situation. And this isn't really even that. This is allowing state-funded abortion at the local emergency room. Mm-hmm. And so this really, if this leak is true, it's a loss, and it'll be used as cannon fodder, and it'll be used for Biden to say Trump's going to try to steal ladies' rights, and it's going to be Trump saying, I'm not for a national ban.
Yeah.
Either way, we lose.
What most people need to realize about Republicans is that Republicans are pro-life. The majority of Republicans, I don't want to blanket to the individual, but the party in general are pro-life enough to have the credit to be pro-life without the action of really being pro-life.
Right.
So they just want a check mark on a voter guide that says and really, sadly today, all they have to do is more pro-life than their liberal opponent.
Republicans are like, alcohol's bad for you, but they're all weekend drinkers.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of what they are, even in the issue of
and going to the life.
I know that's cynical, Pastor.
No,
I'm sorry.
I get it. Listen, we've been to those we've been to those things, right? Right. It's very disappointing.
Yeah.
Or have outside the room. We didn't go.
Right.
But, you know what I'm saying. But even when you talk about this case of emergency, and it's always the hypothetical extremes that we try to make blanket policy that affects everybody, which is not a good way to make policy.
Yeah.
Because there are already principles and policies in place that address the extreme. And so if a paramedic comes up to a car wreck, he immediately does triage. And his first goal, let's say there's two people in a car wreck. Mm-hmm. His first goal is to save the life of both of them. Mm-hmm. But if he comes to a situation and he realizes I can only save the life of one of them, he makes a decision. Yeah. He makes a decision. And those are life and death decisions. Those are hard decisions. But there's already a medical ethic on how you make that decision. Right. On the battlefield, we do the same thing. And so the same idea with a baby and a mother in danger, it's triage. You make if both lives can be saved, you save both lives. Yeah. If we're past that point, then a doctor or a triage has to happen on what needs to happen there. And
it used to be society was so against infanticide and abortion. Mm-hmm. I mean, even in early America, that the esprit de corps was if the mother was going to risk her life in this birth, then she said, save the baby. That's what was in her mind. That was the pressure that was on her, right or wrong. That was just the reality of it. And but today that's shifted. It's so easy to say, well, let me save my life by that. So that's going to be going on. That's a leak. It hasn't come out yet, but we're going to find out how it comes out, and it's going to play out in the election, in the news. And so, folks, if you're a born-again, Bible-believing Christian and you believe in the Bible culture, having a Bible nation, we can't accept wholesale abortion or 98, even 2% abortion. It needs to be a rare, less than 1% thing. So secondly in the news is the Biden-Trump debate, the debate of the century. This is like Fraser Ali 3 or something. This is supposed to be the big one. And yet, I'm sorry, I can't get excited about it. I don't believe it's going to be substantive. I don't believe it's going to be half coherent. I know even Trump's side is saying, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. And the rules are all, CNN has set the rules, and Trump's agreed to them, to where if he tries to act out as a jerk, the mic's going to be cut and it's going to make him look bad. So somehow, does that mean he's running to the middle and he's going to be this statesman gentleman or something? I don't know. I doubt it. But if I watch it, I'm going to do it with a barf bag, because I think it's just going to make me sick. I don't think it's going to be America's finest moment. Or I wish the whole world would just turn away and not watch.
Well, and the media would not be satisfied with America's finest moment. That's not what they want.
No,
they want the circus.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, they're invested. The money is behind the circus.
Yeah,
and CNN makes more money if it's a circus.
Yeah,
and they make more money. And Jake Trapper makes more money if he turns off the mic on Trump one time for no reason.
Absolutely. He becomes a champion. He writes a book. Yeah.
It's all a circus.
It's infotainment.
Yes.
Is what it is. And so, Lord, it seems like it's a stage that's very important, that's a lot riding on. It seems like a very important thing. It could be influential. Lord, I pray that you would do something specific and magnificent through it. But man, I'm a big doubter right now.
Yeah, and to our listeners, pull us. You and I are really talking right now on the basis of the personalities of these two men. Yeah. Now, if we're talking about
and their platforms, because they're incoherent.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But if we're talking about the greater divide in the between conservatism and liberalism and whatnot, obviously, yes, we are for conservative principles. Yeah. But we're also not necessarily for conservative principles at the cost of insufficient or inadequate candidates.
Right.
We need the best candidates, expounding the best ideas, and showing true leadership, and doing that. Yeah. And so that's what we're for. And if we constantly, as Christian conservatives, surrender what is best for what is adequate, we will always get mediocre.
Yeah. If you pick the lesser two evils, you're going to get evil.
Right.
Eventually.
So we got to all the way up until that moment where you have to pull the lever in the booth, and now that's between you and God. Yeah. Right. Up until that moment, though, publicly, we should be pulling. We should be standing. We should be the stick in the mud on the far right that's causing Republican candidates not to sway to the middle.
We don't quit speaking and putting sense out there that can be caught. We do that, and if there's no moral clarity there, and you're like, man, these issues that I care about aren't really valid, they're just being kind of talked to or leaned to or whatever, then you kind of go back to your Americanism and say, well, who's going to promote the UN or be against the UN or something like that? If Trump comes out and is against the UN, I think that could be an issue if CNN allows it. You know what I mean?
Maybe we can say it this way.
But honestly, as forceful as he is not that articulate.
No.
And he's not that poignant in even his beliefs to be able to say it properly.
Nor is he really that principled.
Right.
He's not grounded in these things. Yeah. He is the political manifestation of Karl Rove, kind of just telling this is what plays.
Yeah.
And now
he's transactional and he wins. He's transactional and he wins.
Bush needed Karl Rove.
Yeah.
But Trump is Karl Rove in the package.
Yeah.
Now you got to give the man credit. Yeah. He does have that sense of what people want to hear.
He does get in the ring, the wrestling ring, and fight. And I think Americans do want that.
And we got to appreciate that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's willing to take off the gloves. Yeah. So who knows? Yeah. Next podcast we'll talk a little bit more about
whatever happened. Whatever happened.
If the internet breaks. Yeah.
Okay, well, thirdly, then, we're talking so much about war posturing. Yesterday and today, the United States, Japan, and South Korea has been doing all kinds of emergency, not planned, but emergency war maneuvers based upon not China, but based upon Russia uniting with North Korea. The scuttlebutt is that the North Koreans are actually sending troops to Russia, and Russia is then sending missiles to North Korea. And so this is required not just the planned maneuvers, but emergency maneuvers that have to deal not with China, but with Russia. And then at the same time, Russia is doing emergency maneuvers in both with their leftover navy, whatever they got left, in both the Caribbean, between Cuba and Venezuela, and the Mediterranean. And in the Mediterranean, the scuttlebutt is if Israel attacks, Iran, that the Russian Navy will be there to counter. And of course, up there in the little triangle that I call Turkey, Syria, and Cyprus. And of course, America and Britain and Israel are all in Cyprus, the Greek side of Cyprus. There are also Russian naval elements there that function out of Latakia, Syria. And so there are Russian troops in Syria, and there is Russian naval and air things there. But they're maneuvering now in a way as to say, hey, we're going to be involved in whatever happens. And the last thing I put on our news thing here was this inevitable Hezbollah-Iran war. Both sides are now saying it's inevitable. We're already in it. We're already in World War III. It's just a matter now of who gets their placement, because it's not going to be a long, drawn-out affair once it goes. It's going to be all out. Israel is not just going to fight Iran's proxies. Israel is going to fight Iran, and then it's a matter of, does Russia respond or does America respond? And America right now is saying we might not respond. They're telling Israel we might not respond.
So Israel is not situated to fight a war of attrition.
Right.
And they know this.
They know that.
This is why they are geared up for knockout punches.
And I think from October 7th that they're like, okay, we got to play this thing for the end game. I think Netanyahu is that kind of person, and I think that's why he's getting all this blustery comment from generals and from everybody else. Plus, I think people don't realize this is how Israel plays things. They always play, let's make everyone else think we're divided. They always do that. And the reality is, while they're thinking that and playing this, we're preparing over here. Their MO is to always let someone in the room who plays the devil's advocate and plays against. They always do that, and it's not hard, but the enemies always take the bait on that sort of thing. And so, they literally mobilized 330,000 guardsmen or, reserves, and they've been slowly moving them north. And so it's not that they're waiting for Hezbollah to do something. They're ready for all-out invasion, and I think that's going to include Jordan and Syria. Now, the beginning of this podcast season, our first episode was on War 2024. I mean, it was all there. Everything was lined up, but there was no smoking gun yet. And now, there's smoking guns all over the place. And so this is something of biblical proportions in the news for people to watch. And so, the Olympics and the Euro soccer and the Supreme Court, the debates, all this stuff is big news. But always simmering in the back is this idea that Israel and Iran, somebody's going to take out the Temple Mount. When missiles start flying, that's when something's going to happen, and then somebody's going to force the red heifer, and you got biblical proportions going on. So not everyone thinks coherently or speaks coherently about that, but I think that's something we ought to be watching. And the Bible says pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We're not praying for war. We're praying for peace, because we know once it starts, that's it. And we as Christians, we're focused on winning souls to Christ and putting missionaries everywhere. And actually, in Iran, there are people converting to Christ like crazy. In Israel, there are people converting to Christ as like crazy. And so that's the work we're about, not war. But as it's there, there's no preparing for the rapture other than to be saved, other than to be godly, and other to be at your Father's business. That's how you're prepared.
And watchful.
Yeah, you're watchful, I think, because that helps you to be prepared and really motivates you to speak. But nevertheless, it still is a good time to promote Christian citizenship. More than ever. And so that's why we're kind of promoting Christian citizenship by Dr. Byron Fox and Dr. Phil Stringer, and beautiful original artwork by Josiah, kind of the blueprints of some of the nation's Capitol buildings.
Josiah Lebeck.
What'd I say?
Just Josiah.
Oh, Josiah
Means your
Lebeck.
son. I know you don't want to brag on your son,
Yeah.
but I'll brag on him for you.
Yeah. Well, there's
Good job, Joey.
It's a joint effort. You know what I'm saying? And beautiful quotes on the back. The gray line going through this cover is because this is a not for resale proof copy. It's about 400 pages, and
so what were these? These were a series of lectures,
yes.
or what are these chapters really?
So Dr. Byron Fox from Bible Truth Music has done a fantastic job of really preaching what godly music is, kind of doing revival meetings around the country, producing hymn books and other good literature. And so is well known, and he's been at it. But behind the scenes, he's been a Christian statesman. He's been involved in Virginia politics, but then he kind of has taken that as kind of an export, and he's involved in several patriotic organizations and communities. And so was Dr. Phil Stringer, who was an educator. And they basically got together and said, let's do some lectures to our students and have a Christian citizenship class. And they approached us and said, will Bible Nation be interested in publishing the book? And so that's basically, these are lectures, and they're in the live voice. And these are the lectures that they put together. And so you got 2 premium independent Baptist Christian statesmen speaking and teaching on these issues of Christian citizenship. And so we got it printed, and we're going to start promoting this. And we thought Christian citizenship was just a great topic.
Well, we have a long connection with both of these individuals, and it goes back to the 400th anniversary of the King James Bible and the expo that we hosted on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. From that, out of that meeting, that was kind of the very beginning of the a lot of the pastor meetings that began happening in Washington, D.C.
Right.
His name just went through my...
Dr. Chuck Harding.
Chuck Harding, but then there's another church down there in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Forgive me.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay. And they worked with us with the expo, and then they started hosting a lot of meetings down there. And then from that, Byron Fox started doing these God Bless America crusades, and we helped out with some of those.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of building now from the
Lord started something in that. There's no
and it started building from bring revival, and which we are for, right? We need revival, that is the answer.
That is
people getting saved, but then understanding that along with the revival preaching, the pulpit needs to speak to some policy as well. And so that kind of the evolution here now, I would tell you, Bible Nation Society has been doing this for over 20 years. The idea of speaking policy. And that's more than preaching the gospel. We got to preach the gospel. And Bible Nation Society is a gospel preaching organization. But also the Bible has an opinion about policy. And so that's a lot about this idea of Christian citizenship. The Bible tells us how to be good citizens.
We want pastors to read the text, make the proposition, and preach Christian civics to the Christians. But then also Bible Nation Society speaks to the lost by reversing that and putting up the subject matter and then reversing that down to the proposition and the text to try to show them that the Bible does speak about this. But I appreciate these men. We've been together, really since the beginning of all our efforts. And the great thing, the thing that I learned about this in this Christian citizenship, the way that they verbalized that there is a Christian doctrine of government, just like there's a Christian doctrine of sin, a Christian doctrine of heaven, et cetera, et cetera. There's a Christian doctrine of government that you can boil down in Scripture. And the United States, our founders, were so Bibline in their thinking that they were able to boil it down and really put it, the English had done a lot through their Christian statesmen and Christian citizenship, but our forefathers basically had the Bible and the British formation of governments in their mind. And so putting those two things together, they came up with this Christian doctrine of government. And basically that's what the Declaration of Independence is. The Declaration of Independence is really this Christian doctrine of government put in a secular format, sent to the world. It's almost a missionary letter, to the rest of the world. And ever since then, it's been a success. And the whole world has looked at it. And when the whole world is rejecting the United States today, or not liking certain aspects, they're rejecting the Christian doctrine of government. That's really kind of what they're doing, and they're wanting their own thing. And so there are chapters on the Declaration. The Constitution then was the philosophy and enactment. If this is the Christian doctrine of government, what is our philosophy of how to enact that? And that's the Constitution. And I love the way that both these guys speak to that and put that there. And then, of course, they talk about the Bill of Rights and go through the Bill of Rights, but kind of emphasize the First Amendment and the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. So, Pastor Jay, I think that almost is its own sermon, its own topic, the Christian doctrine of government. I know later this year we have these Bible Nation weekends that we put on as kind of a blueprint for other people. And we have one on civics and government. And I think one of us should preach on the Christian doctrine of government. I think that'd be, a really good thing when we get to that in late October. But I love it when I learn something. I've been around a long time. We've been on the front end of formulating, creative speech on things. and had the license to do it. But when I find some guys articulating something in such a way that lights me up, man, it excites me. I like the idea of that the Declaration of Independence was the Christian doctrine of government ensconced in those words. You know, Jefferson, they say, is a deist, but man, there's a whole lot of Bible in his words. And then the Constitution was the philosophy enactment. Well, we're going to have a 3-part government that checks each other. That comes from the Bible. We're going to have 2 houses of government. That comes from the Bible. We're going to have rules deduced that your presiding agent comes up. And what did the early Americans say? There's no king but King Jesus. We don't want a king. We'll have a presiding officer. And as long as we have Christians are going to want a Christian presiding officer. Mm-hmm. And man, even though we're 250 years old, the truth is America still has a large Christian contingency, the largest voting bloc, and that usually is everyone who's president says, I'm a Christian. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we want. Now, that's so watered down and weak today, right, but yet it's still an element that is there, and that philosophy of enactment was absolutely brilliant. And then the hardcores, like the Baptists and the Lutherans, they said, we're not signing the Constitution without the Bill of Rights. We want these rights to where the government's not going to infringe. And so...
Yeah, and that was led by the efforts of a Baptist minister named John Leland,
yeah,
who heavily influenced, he was friends with Jefferson, yeah, but he was also heavily influenced Madison.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of...
They knew each other. Yeah, all those guys knew each other.
And so, you and I come from our backgrounds, a little bit of some church politics, associational churches.
Yeah.
And that was very prevalent during that time. Mm-hmm. And so these churches were associational in the sense of
how did they govern themselves?
They organized with each other, yep, and they projected influence.
They wrote the government and said, "This is what we want."
Right.
Yeah.
And so now you think about back historically, that's what the Southern Baptist Convention was.
Yeah.
But when was the last time the Southern Baptist Convention has influenced policy in America?
Right.
They can't even get. I know this is a side note,
yeah,
but they can't even get women preachers rights. Right now.
Yeah.
And so we've lost this voice, and to have a book like this that amongst independent Baptists, yeah, to say, hey, here is kind of and there's probably some areas in this book where we would nuance it a little bit different, maybe be a little bit more poignant, but here's a rallying point that almost all independent Baptists ought to be able to get together and agree on this.
Yeah.
How we apply it, maybe how your rhetoric from your pulpit might be a little bit different, but these are the core principles that we would all agree on.
Absolutely, and the other thing that they both emphasize, besides the Christian doctrine or philosophy of enactment of government, is that they say, and I'm just going to do one little excerpt here, but the fact is the principles of Christianity created the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. The United States only works efficiently, and this is a big statement. The United States only works efficiently when those principles are understood and acknowledged by a significant number of people without attempting to impose them on society. Mm-hmm. So they didn't enforce, they encouraged. Mm-hmm. And that's something both these guys talk about, is that they didn't ensconce it in law and make you be a Baptist. Mm-hmm. And they didn't say the government had that power whatsoever, but they made sure that the government was out of the way and was encouraging morality and religion, mm-hmm, amongst all of them. And so that was the nuance, and they spelled it out very clear, and they teach it very clear. He goes on to say, when you don't have Christian principles of government, you end up with different principles of government. And those ideas that the government operates on impacts the daily life of everyone. And then depending on the government, its economic strength, its geographic position, the interests of its leaders, the principles of a government or of a culture impact other nations around it or other nations around the world. Mm. And so when we say Bible nation, we're talking about Israel, we're talking about the United States, we're talking about any nation. But our nation in particular had this Christian doctrine that influenced the philosophy and enactment, and that could only stay true to the extent that the population was true. Mm-hmm. And so why are we having problems today? Well, our population is...
Right.
So if we have wholesale immigration, then you can manipulate their votes, right? Mm-hmm. If you give people what they want, mm-hmm, and they don't want Christ, then now you have an issue. And that's the only reason why we're where we're at today. And but I really learned that from this book.
Let me go along with that thought, because I'm on page 189 about talking about the Declaration of Independence, which is probably one of the greatest man-made documents ever created. To secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men. They're dealing with that phrase. The very important phrase clearly reveals the founder's vision of the purpose of government. Government's purpose is to protect the rights given to man by God. This is exactly the Christian doctrine of government, according to Romans 13, looked at earlier.
Yeah.
God-ordained rulers are a terror to evil works and a terror to good works. God-ordained rulers are a terror to evil works and not a terror to good works.
Right.
So according to 1 Peter 2:13, 14, it is the role of kings and governors to punish evildoers and to praise those who do well. Outside of those cultures influenced by the scripture, no culture in the history of mankind has presented this philosophy of government.
Yes.
In every other system of government, you live for the sake of the government. The Christian philosophy of government, the government exists for you. Yeah. The founders felt that they were acting consistently.
So beautiful. I mean, you're going to want to get this book, Christian Citizenship, from the Bible Nation Society. Now, we go on to, in this book, not just the founding documents, but the responsibility of Christians. And this is huge. Some of the chapter titles that deal with this concept, let me just give them to you, are civic responsibilities of Christians, the wisdom of being salt and light, on voting, godly men in high office, the example of Daniel, elections have consequences. So all these are dealing with the responsibility of Christians. So be informed and prayerful. Pastor Jay, what are things that you do to help your congregation be informed and prayerful?
About government?
Yeah, about government. Like we have Tuesday night meetings of the public that can come and they talk about these issues.
We participate.
Yeah.
And so our facilities have been available to organizations like Stand Up Michigan, and they have meetings here. And so the citizens and our local citizens have opportunities to come and hear about the issues. And so Emmanuel historically has not been afraid to involve itself in the fray. And almost to the point where erroneously, because they really don't know us, well, that's the political church.
Right.
We're not a political church, but we are a church that's not afraid to speak to politics.
Yeah, that's part of the culture.
Right.
It's part of the culture. And so the Bible speaks to it. Yeah, so I would say that you've done a good job. We've done a good job at making sure our people are at least informed, that they hear the vocabulary, they know what's going on, and then that we're prayerful. So we have Biden and Whitmer, our Democratic president and governor, we have them on our prayer list. And so we're for praying for those in authority over us, whoever they may be. And we don't pray evil on them. We pray, Lord, help them to be joyful. And you're the thing that's going to make them joyful. Help their families. You're the one that's going to help their families. And so, we don't pray evil upon them, pray good. And we pray the Lord to move them to good decisions. And I don't know to what extent we may, as bad as it is, our prayers, right? Christians' prayers might have preserved us or moved us, but I'm sure we'll know that in the future. The responsibility of Christians is also then to vote. Not vote, but to vote, and to really persuade others to vote. And so Christians, when we win, usually we're getting other people to register to vote and mobilize to vote. And this is where Byron Fox has won today in Virginia and in other southern communities, is he's done a masterful job at getting churches to not be apathetic. And so he'll call a pastor and say, did you guys pray last night? Did you vote? I mean, he really is for that. And so he has some good chapters in here on making sure you vote and persuade others to vote. Now, the problem with it's not a problem, but by allowing voting to take place a month before in, a bunch of different things, you don't know what's going on. You kind of lose control. There should be live voting in one place on one day and not this plethora of ways that you can vote.
We've lost the sanctity of the vote.
Yes.
And that needs to be preserved. And
by the way, our
election integrity is a very important. Without it, the system doesn't work.
By the way, our former sheriff, who's now our legislator, he just put out an election card, promotional card, and it's all about the sanctity of elections. And I thought, good for you, because he's spoken to a lot of things, voted on a lot of things, but he's like, we're going to have, I'm going to fight, and he's a law enforcement officer, to have legal elections, and this is what they should be. And man, he put it out there, and I thought, good for you.
And the onus, going on that idea of the integrity of an election, the onus is not, where it should be is not the government looks at us and goes, trust us. No, the integrity of elections is elections that have accountability.
Yeah, verify.
So it's not trust us.
Yeah.
We should be saying, show us.
Yeah.
Show us.
Yeah.
We should be able to see the poll. I mean, not show us the individual, how they voted, but we should see the vote counts. It should make sense.
Yeah.
We should know what the voter rolls look like, and the numbers should match.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't have jurisdictions that have more votes than voters.
And if we are moving to electronic stuff, then that should all be within the United States. That should not be foreign companies, foreign computers, foreign software, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're still going to take paper ballots and move them from point A to point B, then that needs to be controlled. Maybe a local law enforcement, goes behind the truck that's carrying the ballots or something, because that seems to be where a lot of hocus pocus takes place.
Let me illustrate it this way. I use my iPhone a lot. I have apps on there.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts when these apps constantly sign you out, and it takes an act of Congress to sign back into the McDonald's app.
Right.
And they want change your password,
Right.
2 points of verification, and I'm just trying to order a McMuffin.
Right.
But I'm telling you, the McDonald's app
Is
takes more verification than voting in America.
maybe McDonald's needs to handle the vote from now on.
I mean, the iPhone does a facial recognition on me. They want my date of birth.
Yeah.
Can I just get an egg McMuffin?
Yeah.
And then here to go vote, you don't even have to have an ID.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. They go on to, and I think they have good support in this book for running for office. Mm-hmm. And good men, pastors, you should all be running for office. If you're the best, the pastors should all be running for office in public service. I've run for office 3 times. Even if you run and don't win, you are raising awareness. You are speaking to the enemy. You are persuading people on your platform, which should be biblical. And so even if you don't run, who else is going to run, right? And what are they going to say? So run for office and then support the people that do by giving them money, by knocking on doors for them, or participating. Run for office or support those that do. And every local church should have somebody running.
So let's stop there for a second, because this one might be a little bit of a nuanced difference that highlights some of yours and mine's particularness.
Sure.
We would say run for office, and we agree with what's going on in the book here, but we would say run for office to be part of the conversation.
Sure.
To get biblical thought out there.
Yeah.
But if your pragmatism of winning the office causes you not to say what you need to say, then you're not really running for office.
Right.
And that has kind of been the failure a little bit
Yep.
In Christian political activity,
Yeah.
where we become so pragmatic to say, well, it does us no good unless I win.
Yeah.
But if winning forces you to always be silent,
Yeah.
then it doesn't do us any good either. And we've had that a lot here in the state of Michigan, where we've had legislators who we had that, we had a Republican, we had an independent Baptist in the highest seat of our legislature. We had supposedly a conservative legislature that was full of, and yet what did we get done?
Nothing. We lost everything.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's called lifting up a softball.
And I'll tell you, I think Dr. Byron Fox speaks well to this in how do you vet. He kind of gives a practical thing of how do you vet a guy? What are the questions that you ask? How do you get them to come to public understanding? What do you say to them? How do you say it to them? And so when you run for office, support those that do, vet those that are running. And the last thing he talks about is advocacy, and that's kind of lobbying, or if there's issues. And Dr. Stringer talks about education in the state of Florida and Illinois, and Dr. Fox talks about gambling, the gambling issue, and vetting people on the gambling issue, lottery tickets, et cetera, and what that does for society. And so, that in that way, you can mobilize people as well. And so we have the Christian doctrine of government, responsibility of Christians, and lastly, then, a Christian nation. And so I thought Dr. Stringer did a great job on giving a myriad of quotes. There are hundreds of quotes in here from our founding fathers all the way up to today about how the United States is a Christian nation. Our founding and our founding fathers were overwhelmingly Christian, overwhelmingly Bibline, and they were speaking to a biblically literate society, and that was the foundation of their minds and what they wanted for government. And it talks about the continued formation even up until 2024 and how these Christian issues formulate elections in society. And even, we'll just say Democrats, okay? Bill Clinton and Al Gore were both Southern Baptists. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Carter was a Southern Baptist. Yeah. So you've got people on the leftist side of things who are Baptist, speaking Baptistic, and yet not really holding that in their heart at all. They'll go and sing in the choir, and they'll kind of do all that, and yet they are pro-abortion, right? And so we have to, understand that that's being formulated even today, but there's deception. And even Jesus said that the greatest threat in the last days is spiritual deception. Mm-hmm. And so powerful offices like the Kremlin, where Putin prays, or the presidency where the president holds up a Bible or whatever. Everyone plays to it, but the reality is they are not living it, and they probably don't really think it because they're not enacting it. And today, are we a Christian nation today? Are we still a Christian nation today? Maybe in the residue, maybe in the fumes, maybe in the footprint, maybe in the fossils. But the practical matter is not matching up with the Bible.
Well, and we can answer that question the same way as we talk about our founding. We are as Christian, and we are a Christian nation today as much as we are Christians.
Right.
And the reason we would say America was founded as a Christian nation was not because it was this church state. Actually, we're against the church state. It was a Christian nation because it was founded by Christian men. Mm-hmm. And so the composition of the founders was overwhelmingly Christian and not quiet deists. I mean, all but in many roles, in their time and age, what would have been an evangelical of their sort, mm-hmm. in their time and age, mm-hmm. Influenced by the Great Awakening and preachers like George Whitefield and whatnot. And so they were very fluent with these things. Mm-hmm. And so we were founded as a Christian nation in so much that we were founded by Christians. And we are a Christian nation today so much as we are Christians. And that's the problem. That's the problem. The problem is even the Republican Party or those things that are conservative have abandoned Christianity.
White Christian nationalism is a threat. I don't think it's as big a threat as Arabic Muslim terror, but the reality is we don't think that we want a Christian government. We want Christians in government.
Right.
But to have a Christian nation is to have a great majority of the people thinking Bibline,
right, and
endorsing the Christian philosophy of government. And even in Washington's day, there were people that wanted him to be king. Mm-hmm. But he said no, and those around him said no, and they all loved him for it because he could have gone there. Mm-hmm. But he didn't, and then he stepped out. He didn't take a lifetime position. Mm-hmm. And so these men believed that was the Christian philosophy, that you're not king forever and you don't preside forever, that the Christian people get to choose, and they get to look at the character of who they're electing as well. And so that's where we are today. And so our applications really are, why are we talking about civil war? Why are we so divided? Jesus said in Matthew 12:25, the Bible says, "And Jesus knew their thoughts and said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand." People often say, where's America in the Bible or whatever? Well, maybe we just break in half. Maybe we just break and crumble in pieces, and it's just not worth, speaking about. It's there, the people are there, the geography is there, maybe there's some governance there, but it just blends into the evil of the day. It doesn't stand out any longer. And so I think it's sad. We ought to try to always have a uniting tone. But then sometimes we have to call out evil and correct it. And I think that's part of a uniting tone. And then people always question us, Pastor Jay. You just spoke to it wonderfully about, can we be a Christian nation? Well, we can be a righteous nation. We can be a nation that upholds righteousness. There are nations that uphold evil. There are. And then there are nations that uphold righteousness. Some of these African nations have taken greater stands in the United Nations and with denominationalism. Some of these African nations are purer and more righteous than any other on the planet because they've taken a stand on marriage and against homosexuality and et cetera, et cetera. And so, I'm proud of them. Isaiah 26:1-2 are kind of our theme verses for Bible Nation Society. I thought we'd end on these. In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. Salvation will God appoint for walls and bulwarks. And then verse 2. So salvation is of Jesus, right? So it's Judah, but it's salvation, which is Jesus, and he's the walls and the bulwarks. And then verse 2 says, "Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in." That's not talking about just Judah. That's talking about those that enter into salvation. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about a Bible nation, a Christian nation, a righteous nation, Isaiah 26:2 is our theme. Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in. And so, if you have no evangelism, you have no righteous nation, right? Because without the righteousness of Christ, you only have the best that man can give, which is evil, right? And so, do we believe in a Christian Bible doctrine of government and a Christian philosophy of enactment in our founding documents and our founding fathers being of that mind, not to enact a Christian government, but to get out of the way of Christianity and to endorse morality and reverence? Yeah, and that is evident in our book, Christian Citizenship, lectures by Dr. Byron Fox and Dr. Phil Stringer. They are out this weekend in Chicago, having the opening of this book, and this will be available very soon for you to purchase on BibleNation.org. Remember, the best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven and it works. Hi, this is Doug Levesque. Thanks for watching the Bible Nation podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Go to our website, BibleNation.org, to check out all of our offerings. Thanks again for watching.